So here we are at last. We have begun. You've made it this far, so you've obviously navigated your way through Patreon, so well done for that. And you've signed up for a month to see how you get on with it, and I hope you like it. Awful lot hinges on it, to be honest. I'm going to have a few little upgrades up here. I'm going to get myself a nice, well, about nice, I'm probably going to make it because everything's got to come up through a loft hatch, but I'm going to end up with some sort of a desky arrangement and a chair so I can do some riggy stuff in the future, but that's in the future. For now, this is the first episode from a flick of the tail, and we're sort of going to delve straight in, I reckon. We've done enough talking about it, we might as well get started. So my story starts, as all good stories should do, in a pub, but not just any pub. It starts in the Perseverance pub, which is situated right in the middle of Wraysbury Village, in the Colne Valley, surrounded by lakes, historic, beautiful lakes. Horton, you've got Wraysbury 2 literally just over the road, Longfield Lakes are only just up the road, about half a mile away. There's stuff over Kingsmead Island, the boat pools there, and of course right behind the pub, literally coming up to the field behind, is Wraysbury 1, where I had been for the previous 3 years or 2.5 years. But I'd sort of caught what I wanted to catch, or I hadn't caught what I wanted to catch, I'd caught what I could catch out of there. I'd had recaptures of the main sort of Mary's gang, if you like, the known fish in there. I'd had a couple of them 2 times, 2 or 3 of them 3 times each. And I decided that it was time for a change, it was time to move on. And just on the back of this group of lakes was the Mere. Now, we knew, you know, a bit about the Mere, but not an awful lot back then. And it's a strange lake, in as much as it sort of hides itself. It's right in the middle of all of this that I've mentioned. But it's sort of shrouded, not only by the trees and the undergrowth, but there's quite large lakes, one each side of it, that sort of curl around it. And the Mere is stuck in the middle. You know, if you were to look from above, you'd see this valley full of lakes with these 2 very long lakes, and in the middle this big elongated triangle, and that is the Mere. So it's hidden inside these other lakes, as it were, and it's also hidden in its own shroud of undergrowth and overgrowth, trees, brambles, dog roses, nettles. It's a jungle. It really is a jungle. One bank of the lake is actually a public footpath. You can come in off the road, walk down this little path and follow the high bank, we called it, of the Mere. It's not a very well used footpath, and it doesn't look like a footpath. There's trees falling down over it, the bushes are coming in to reclaim what was once their land, but it is actually public access. But like I say, really all you see is the odd bird watcher and stuff over there. But anyway, back to the pub. So we're in the pub, we're in the public bar. The Perseverance public bar it's changed a little bit now, still nice, but it was a proper public bar, you know, an old boys bar where George has got his seat over there, Bert's got his seat and his own tankard, and you daren't sit on that stool or that stool, and, you know, smoking in the pubs back then as well, so you got that sort of low-level cloud of cigarette smoke as you walk in there, big fire in the corner, proper pub, floorboards, sticky floorboards on the floor. Absolutely loved the place. So I'm sat in there one day, I am ragged, I'm covered in stings, I'm sitting at the table picking thorns and stuff out the back of my hand, pint of Guinness in front of me, of course, because, you know, what decent story ever started with a glass of milk? It doesn't, does it? So pint of Guinness, Fat Sam on the floor next to me, looking more ragged than I was. I had little trickles of blood coming out of cuts, and I was buzzing all over. Buzzing for 2 reasons, really. Buzzing because of the amount of stinging nettle welts I had on my arms and my legs and my neck, and buzzing because I just walked my first circuit of the Mere. I'd known about the Mere for a few years, to be honest, and I say it was my first circuit. I had been over there for a look once years before, just after Jason Hayward caught the Black Mirror for the very first and only time at this stage, at that stage I should say. I went over, me and Tetley went for a walk around there, and it was very different then. It was a lot more open. It was still, you know, beautiful and overgrown, but not to the extent it was when I went back for this trip. It's 40 acres. And it was a little bit unknown, but about 20 carp. So not exactly overstocked, but the 20 carp it held were very, very special carp indeed. Obviously, king of the pond, the Black Mirror. You know, we all know of the Black Mirror now. Not so many people knew of the Black Mirror back then, well, no one did until Jason caught it and he won the Cobra Cup. A story that I alluded to in the last series, when we had that fateful transit journey up to swap the Cobra Cup from Jason to me, and we all got very, very drunk. But that's a previous story. So, also, as well as the Black Mirror, alongside the Black Mirror, in there you have probably, I think there was 4 mirrors in total. There was the Black Mirror, there was a lovely linear around the 40-pound mark. There was one other sort of semi-linear, scattered linear if you like. Beautiful, beautiful looking mirror that was, that my mate Phil Thompson had caught. There was a small dumpy one in there. Not very many mirrors, like I said, at all. 4, maybe 5 at a push. Wasn't 100% sure. And the rest were commons, but they were gorgeous commons. They called them Redmire commons. I don't know whether they actually come from there originally. I'm assuming they do. Mostly very, very dark fish. The odd one completely different. There was a couple of golden ones in there. And there was the king of the commons. There was an enormous common in this lake, and as far as I know, that fish never got caught. It's gone now. Most of them have gone. I think they're all gone now. But that common was just an amazing creature, similar in size and stature to the Black Mirror. You know, over the years, stories that I'll tell, I got to see them both together. And they were similar in size. So, you know, you've got some proper jewels in there, some proper targets, and you've got the Black Mirror. I mean, you know, the ultimate target. So, my first trip round the lake. I went armed with a single rod sleeve. I had a rod for all purposes in there, and a landing net, and a little tiny rucksack. I've got this little rucksack that I've taken. It's all been all around the world with me. It's been to China, it's been to Korea, it's been to the top of a mountain. I lent it when I was in France to my friend James, who skied down a glacier with it. It's been all around Europe. I've used it for hitchhiking. It's just this tiny little green canvas rucksack, but I love it. And that was my stalking rucksack. In fact, to be honest, one day when I was in China working, I was in Hengfeng, which is a company where most of your fishing tackle comes from, and I'd broken the strap and I was distraught. And I said to at a business meeting, I said to the owner of Hengfeng, I said, while we're here having this meeting, I said, I don't suppose you've got anyone that can fix this stitching in your many, many departments. And he's picked it up, he said, that's one of ours. He said, no problem, I'll just replace it with a new one. I was like, no, do not do that. Just repair it. And he looked at me like I was mad, because it was this cheap little rucksack. But it meant a lot to me. And anyway, that was the rucksack that accompanied me on my first trip round the Mere. And inside the rucksack was my normal tackle box, which at the time was a little bait box, a green FGCO maggot box, and in there I had a couple of leads, a couple of hooks, a couple of beads, a floater controller, various knickknacks, but not an awful lot. I had a very crusty cheese roll that I'd bought from Boss's shop on the corner on my way down there, packet of crisps, bottle of water, couple of dog treats, and that was probably about it. It was pre-mobile phone or anything, so I didn't have to have any sort of digital equipment with me, didn't have a camera, didn't have anything, just a cut rod, a net, and what I needed, probably a handful of boilies kicking around in the bottom, hard and mouldy, knowing me back then. And I set off. I parked in on the road at the top. There's a little lay-by, and I parked in there, walked down the road, because the Mere, you're not strictly sort of allowed to be there. Well, you're allowed to be there, you're just not allowed to fish there. So I walked along the road and there's an entrance to the Disabled Sailing Club, and it's got an electric gate there, but it's only low, you can hop right over it, but it's got this big long electric gate that leads into a drive that goes round to their lake. Just as you go round the bend there, or halfway to their lake, there's this little path which is, like I say, a public footpath. And you go up this footpath, and as you walk along this little footpath, you've got the Hythe Lagoon to your left, and to your right you've got this sort of big scrubby field, if you like, with the disabled lake behind it. And as you look ahead in the path, there's this beautiful cove of trees. They join over the top like that, and it's all dark and mysterious inside, and the path cuts straight through into this cove. You go in the cove and you walk for about, I don't know, 50-60 yards, and then you see the mere. You come out in the bottom left hand corner at the wider end of the mere, and then you come out into what looks like a swim, but it isn't. It's got one of those depth meters, you know, those sort of wooden plank things that stick out of lakes sometimes with the meterage on to work out if things are in flood or dropping or raising. And there's some sort of a manhole thing there as well, so I assume that bit's cut for the water board or whatever, you know, the local water authority to take surveys and stuff. And that's probably the most open bit of the whole mere, is this very, very first bit you see. But from there you can see right up the lake as it tapers off into the distance, and that was the first view I had. The water was beautiful, gin clear. The wind was coming down that way, rippling from the narrow end right down to where I was standing, all along the sort of bulk end of the lake. Straight away it just looked lovely, absolutely gorgeous, and I decided to follow the public footpath to start with, which took some finding, to be honest. But once I was on it, I wound my way through the trees. There was a big fallen tree sort of half over the path. I ducked under that. Me and the dog shot along there, sort of looking for places that I'd be able to fish, really, but there wasn't an awful lot in the way of swims. The very first bit you come to is a little tiny peninsula, which we ended up calling the beach. And that was fishable. There was a bit there that was quite easily fishable, but you were very much on show, and the whole deal at the mere was not to be on show. I carried along the path, and as the path goes alongside the lake, after a couple of 100 yards, I suppose, I couldn't really see a lot more lake at this stage. It was all behind the bushes. The path starts to raise up in the air, and as it comes up, you look down on this big reed bed, and there was an obvious little swim down there, where sort of in a little tiny bay where a southwesterly had blown in. It looked like a prime area to me. And then the path goes right up till you're on this high bank, and from the high bank you get it's a glorious view back down the lake from this big elevated position, and you can see the mere for exactly what it is, and you can see the far bank which is completely encased in everything that's sharp, basically. I say dog rows entwined with bramble and huge fields of nettles, massive 7-8 foot tall stinging nettles. It looks savage over there, but I knew that I'd have to investigate the whole lot. So I carried along to the very pointy end, turned the corner, and then the path finished, and I sort of wove my way through, and there's old fox trails and bits and pieces. You could see at times where there used to be a path, but like I say, it's all been reclaimed by nature now. So I made my way along this back bank, Murder Mile, I think we used to call it, or Suicide Alley, depending one or the other. And it really was. Halfway along there, I actually had to get down practically on my belly like a commando, push the rod bag into the little tiny gap in the brambles in front of me, and push them up and push them to the side, and then on my elbows work my way through. It's all right for the dog, she just sort of got in and shot through. And I made my way down. Halfway along that bank, I got to a point that I actually recognised, and that's where me and Tetley went to have a look, and I believe that's where Jason caught the black mirror originally, and it was called the Snags or Snaggy Point or something, I believe, back then, because it used to have there were still the remnants on this walk, but when I first went, it had white bleached, you know when a tree falls in the water and branches are sticking out and it dies and the weather spatters what's left, and they go bright white, like dead wood, like fingers, if you like, huge fingers sticking out the lake on the corner of this bay. And there was a lovely, really shallow gravel bar came out right from the bank, and a little spindly tree that you could climb. So I shot up there, and sitting in this tree you can see all this shiny gravel, perfect, you know, with the snags there, perfect spot to observe fish in the right conditions. And when they were in there, there weren't any there this day. Anyway, I left there and made my way around what was probably the worst bit of the lot, by which time I was cooked, I was sweating, I was bitten, I was stung, I was in a right old state. And I got into the far corner of the lake, the opposite corner to where I'd come in, but on the same top bank. I got into the corner, and there was actually a gap there, like a little baby swim, and the wind, like I say, was coming up that end. And I remember I was soaked underneath my clothes. I remember stripping off, I think I had a Gore-Tex jacket on and my t-shirt, and I stripped down to my pants and stood there trying to cool off in the wind. And that was when I was introduced to the Mears famous mosquito population. They just smelt and heard my blood, and they were on me like a pack of rabid dogs. Huge, great things just appeared from nowhere attacking me. So I very rapidly got dressed and decided to carry on back round on, you know, the last little, I don't know, 200-yard piece of bank. So I've gone round the corner, going along this bottom bank, and I've got to a little gap in the bushes, wind coming in. I thought that'll do, I'll sit here, I'll have my little bit of lunch, my crusty cheese roll, my bag of crisps, drink of water, and just watch the lake and sort of make up my mind, you know, is it for me? Is this the sort of thing I want? It was proper jungle warfare. So I sat there, dangled my little legs over the side, opened up my cheese roll. I think I'd taken one bite of it, and I was looking out over the lake, and this big golden common, it just came straight out of the ripple about, I don't know, 30 or 40 yards, maybe not even that, in front of me. Just perfectly straight up to its tail root and just toppled over. Bosh! It's moments like that. It's those little things that change your life, you know, change your direction in life. I remember one day, you know, way back, I was on, I went for a walk round St Ives when it was a lesser known lake, and I walked around the fields and the meadows. And the same thing happened there. I was in a little bay, I was just about to go home. I'd stopped for a last wee up a tree before I left, and a fish that I ended up calling the round brown, great big, like 40 pounder. I mean, I've been caught a couple of times in its life, right, mythical creature, came out 6 times in front of me. And that led to something like 3 years of angling on that lake. And that's the thing, it's those little tiny moments, you know, which is why I call my book Fine Lines, because it is the fine lines that change your destiny, if you like. And this common at the Mere was one of those fine lines. You know, he came out just like saying, catch me if you can, and woof back into the lake. And that changed everything. So the cheese roll was immediately discarded and cleaned up by Fat Sam. I don't think it even hit the ground. Bonk, gone. Unzipped the rod sleeve, got the rod out, which as it happens had a rig on it and had 2 dried up old tiger nuts still on there from my last session on Raysbury, I assume. I thought, that'll do, you know, I was in a flat panic now. Net got set up, put the rod together, and just flicked it out the 40 yards or whatever, right onto the spot where this common had showed. And down it went, and down it went, and down it went, and down it went. And I thought, I wasn't expecting it to be that deep. I don't know, maybe 17, 18 foot it felt like. It was a proper deep bit of lake, which wasn't what I was hoping for. But anyway, put the rod down, slackened the clutch, and sat there just like waiting for it to come back out, or waiting for that rod tip to whip round and the clutch to go on the old 55s. I'm still using those at the time, these little babies. Yeah, I suppose, I don't know, I must have sat there for maybe a couple of hours, done my water, done my crisps, and then I didn't see any more, and I thought, you know, I'm not going to get, after a while I thought I'm probably not going to get a bite. It's deep water, I don't know anything about the lake, I could be in a massive weed bed for all I know. One little flick on a couple of dehydrated tiger nuts. So I wound the rod in, which was actually clear as it happens, wound that in, put it all away, packed the net up, got the dog, and set off for the last sort of 50-60 yards round the bank, up the path, back in the motor, back down the Percy, and that's where we started in the Perseverance. Sat in there just replaying that amazing sighting of this, a mere carp, first proper look, rod in hand, mere carp out the water. And I knew when I was sitting in that pub that lake had caught, I hadn't caught them, but that lake had caught me. That was going to be my new home, if you like. That was going to be my target, my focus. And like I say, the Black Mirror lived there. And do you dare dream that one day, maybe you'll look in the landing net and that immaculate fish will be in there, because that was the fish of a lifetime. And he lived in this lake, and I was going to fish for him. So over the next week, I hounded Phil, poor bloke, because he'd fished there. Back in the day, it used to have a ticket on it. It was, I think it was Amy Roadstone, or one of the gravel companies controlled the fishing rights on there, which had since elapsed. He'd fished there, not only did he fish there, he'd caught a carp from there. He hadn't done much on there, but any knowledge was good knowledge. And he was like best mates with Jason, who'd obviously done quite a lot on there. So I was just on his case for information. I wanted to come up there and fish. We've been fishing together at Raysbury, and I said, why don't we both go over there? And he was just so, not even hesitant. He was just like, no, there is no way I'm going back to the Mere. I'm like, oh, it can't be that bad. He said, I'm not fishing there, Doug. Can't do it. He said, I'll give you one piece of advice. He said, never drink the water. So wasn't intending to. He said, whatever you do, never drink the water out the Mere. Some sort of magic potion or something. It was quite an odd comment, to be honest, but Phil was quite odd at times anyway. So I liked him. So I took that on board. He told me the little bits that he could, imparted a little bit of information, but it didn't amount to an awful lot really. He said, you're going to get ripped, you're going to get torn, you're going to get stung, you're going to get frustrated, it's rock hard, and don't drink the water. Sort of, apart from the water tip, the rest of it I sort of had already found out on my first visit. So my plan was that over the next few weeks I would do the same. I would do sort of stalking sessions, fact-finding missions, excuse me. But every time I went over, I was planning on taking something with me and leaving it there. It was a perfect place for stashing gear. So first week at home, I camouflaged everything. I laid it all outside the kitchen door. I was painting buckets with I'd got a load of camo paint. I say camo paint, you can't get camo paint, you have to make it. But I'd got a load of paint off of Chile, who was still in the army at the time. Proper army green, army black. I don't know if it's brown or not, but anyway, all these big tubs of army paint. Apparently it's radar proof, it's everything proof. It's good paint, big gloopy thick stuff, and I was slapping it on everything. I did my rods, I did the bivvy, and I did a lot of buckets, like big buckets, and in the buckets I put stuff that I might need when I was over there. Army rations, I used to get army rations off of Chile. They come in little silver foil packs, and they're perfect. They're very, very high calorie, I believe, for marching, lots of energy, and you get things like Lancashire hot pot, such and such stew. You'd get puddings which were disgusting. They were just like so much sugar in there, they were unbelievable. There was these little dumplings in butterscotch sauce, I think it was. It was awful, but if you needed any energy, they were the one, and they lasted forever. Years. So a few of them went in each bucket, and some, dried bait and some floaters and bits of tackle, few hooks and leads and stuff. Just general batteries. Packet of baccy, whatever. And these buckets were sealed down, and I left a few of them dotted around the lake on the first couple of visits. And I was intending to leave everything there. Rods, the lot. Bed chair, bivvy, everything. Because getting in and out was a bit of a nightmare, but once you were in, you were in. But on one of these early trips, again I had my single rod in the sleeve and my little favourite rucksack full of bits and pieces and my dog. On one of these early trips, but I think it was only about the second trip, I'd been up there wandering about, third trip, something like that. I came in again from the same route down by the sort of water stick in the corner. But I went the opposite way. I went along the sort of top bank first to where I'd seen the common and just beyond. And it's quite an elevated position. I suppose you're about 6 foot above the water level there. And as I was walking towards this corner, I could see carp. There was a little group of them milling about in this corner, and I'm sort of all intent on them. And then, I noticed that there was someone there. And I looked across, and sure enough, there was Terry and Nick. And they were both sort of half in and half out of trees watching this same group of fish. So I went down there, sort of give them the nod. I knew that they'd be fishing there this year, and I knew Steve would be fishing there. There was about a total of maybe 5 or 6 of us that had expressed an interest in fishing the lake this particular season. Most of which had come from, or some of which had come from Wraysbury anyway. It was a natural sort of transition, it was the next place to go. So I'd seen these two there anyway, and I sort of took my place behind a tree, the other side of the fish, and I was watching and watching. And I was there we were there a while, and I'm thinking, nothing's happening. They're not fishing for them. I'm not fishing for them. We're just watching them. Admittedly, it was a daytime. You're at the mere. You're probably not supposed to be. Well, you're definitely not supposed to be there. But if we can't let an opportunity like this just go to waste, so opened up the magic rucksack. Had a rummage around in there, little bag of chum mixers, catapult, so I fired out a few, just up breeze because the breeze is coming down right over their heads. Fired out 20 or 30 chum mixers over the back of them. The breeze caught them and they're coming down, and there was 5 fish, I believe it was, and they were doing this little circuit, no more than 2 or 3 rod lengths in sort of circumference. They were going just round, drifting off as if they were going to swim up the lake, and then took the breeze, probably enticed them. They turned round, came back. There was a big reed bed in front of me, and they'd come round the reeds. Like I say, I was higher than the reeds, looking down, and then I see them going round. Anyway, the mixers started to come in, and as they drew level with them, they changed a little bit. The fins bristled a bit. They knew there was something there. And then eventually one of the commons, there's one mirror there, the rest were commons, and one of the commons just came up like that, took one off the surface, and it's just like, opportunity, the old heart starts going. So get back behind the tree and watch again, and then another one came round and came up, boff, nailed one. And I thought, there's a chance here, there's a bite here, there's more than a chance, there's a bite. They don't know we're here, they're willing to feed. At the end of the day, it may be the mere, but it's just carp fishing. They're down there and they want it, and I want them. Unzipped the rod bag, set up. I had the floater gear. I think it still had dried up tiger nuts on the end. Cut all that off, rummaged through the little bag, managed to get myself a controller, length of nylon straight off the reel, let it look, set up a floater rig as best I could, trembling fingers, I could hear the little bits of slurp. They weren't going mad for them, but you could hear every now and again, and you think, oh God, it's all happening, got it all tied up and that, and then I see Terry shoot off to wherever he probably had his gear stashed. Thought, God, I'm missing a chance here, Laney's going to chuck out and whatever. I don't know what he was thinking, but he ran off to get a rod, and I thought, you're going to be far too late, mate. I'm ready. So I fired out a couple more, stood there and just watched for a minute, and they were like a wagon train, when they circle the wagons. They were literally in this circle, and they were coming round, and I chucked my controller out well over the back of them and inched it. Like I say, everything was in my favour. The breeze was coming towards me. I trapped it, at the back of the fish and just held it, and you get that little bow in the line, and the controller follows the bow, and sort of as it straightens out, it swings in, and it swung in on the perfect angle. Controller my side, bait the far side, hook link straight, see it on the surface, couple of mixers around it. It couldn't have looked better. And these, like I say, 5 fish, 4 commons, and 1 little dumpy mirror. Well, they little, one little bit short and deep. They came round in this formation, and I think it went common, mirror. There was a little smaller common at the back anyway, and they've come up one at a time, and the first one's come up straight at the hook bait, and he's come up like that, he's having it, and at the last second he just done what they do, dropped his face and carried on. I thought, you're not that stupid. Then the next one's come round, done exactly the same. Next one, then the mirrors come up, and I thought he's bound to have it. He's a mirror, he's a little fat mirror, he'll love it. Exactly the same. Had a look at it, went down. Then the last fish of the 5 came round, this smaller common. And he came up, no hesitation whatsoever. He just came up, opened his mouth. As he opened his mouth, I looked, and he'd got a small, sort of almost twisted mouth. It's common. And he came up with his smaller gob, opened it like that, and just drank it straight off the surface. And you get that moment, that impasse, don't you? That second when you've got the rod. If you strike, then the hookback's going over your head, 100%. You know, his mouth's still open. You just watch the lips. Just watch the lips, watch the lips. The second the lips shut and he starts to dip down, I just didn't need a strike. I just lifted the rod up into him. Whew, over went the tip. Way went the clutch on the little 55, and he's on. I'm into a fish. There hadn't been, at this stage, a fish caught from the Mere for at least 2 years. There had been hardly anyone fishing it, to be fair, but people had been. It may have been longer than that, but as far as we knew, at least 2 years there hadn't been a fish on the bank. And I'm into one, I'm first cast, basically. Well, I had the cast a couple of weeks before on the mouldy tiger nut, but we discount that. First cast with a proper chance, bong, I'm into a fish. He's done nothing to start with. He's just sort of circled around and thought, what's going on? I can't move. And then he's gone. He's off up the lake. Clutch is going. I was excited. I was shitting myself, to be honest. Terry and Nick obviously appeared, stood there behind me. I'm playing this fish. I shake internally. I'm just like this, gibbering. I knew it wasn't a monster. I knew it wasn't the Black Mirror. I'd seen what it was, but it doesn't matter. It was a fish from the Mere, a new venue, a hard venue, very, very low stock, like I say, 20 fish in 40 acres. And I've got one on the end. It was proper exciting. The old thing's going 5p, 50p, and I'm like, oh God, don't balls this up, don't balls this up. Anyway, I've managed to play him out. It was deep, clear water. There wasn't an awful lot that could go wrong. There were some bad snags to my right, like overhanging bushes and that, but luckily he stayed away from all of that. Eventually I've got him circling in front of the rod tip. Like I say, I'm 5 or 6 foot above the water. There's this reed bed there. I think Nick made a parting in the reeds, and I sort of just slid down the bank on my arse until I was in the swampy bit inside the reeds. He passed down the net, and bosh, in it went. The feeling was just amazing. Pulled him in, had a look at it. He was what I expected, and we called him the Twisted Mouth Common because he was, had a little twisty mouth. I think he was about £22, but he was one of the proper characters. He was one of the small stock of fish in the Mere, and I couldn't have been happier. I really couldn't. Pulled him out, done the weigh in, got back in the proper gap around the corner where I'd stripped off and got eaten alive by the mozzies, and did some photos of him, and it's great, looking back. And I look back, I'm wearing a sort of a blue t-shirt, and I look back at that and think, that didn't last long, because every other photo of everything I've possibly owned at the Mere is camoed, including me, but this, like I say, this was early days. But I didn't care. I'd caught a fish. I was happy as a pig in shit. I suppose all this happened about, it must have been somewhere around the middle of June, something like that. And then, I was up for it before, but after catching one, I was bang up for it. And then I started to do proper sessions. And the more I looked, the more I saw in the way of places to fish. There were old swims, and they were so hidden away. They were incredible, and I love making swims. I mean, anyone that's followed any of my stuff knows how much I love making swims. And somewhere like the Mere was just right up my street, because you could make swims and make hidden swims, and that's half the fun, isn't it? Having something secreted away, some little place of your own that no one on the planet can see you from. Well, when you're in there. So I set to work. I made my first swim I made was my favourite swim on the lake, and I called it the Canopy Tree. It was down very close to where I caught that common on the surface, but just round the corner on the long bank on the Murder Mile. There was a huge tree there. I did research it years later and find out what tree it is, and I've forgotten already. But I called it the canopy tree. It was massive. It was the tallest tree on the mere, but its branches came. The bough was made of a few different boughs all twisted together, and the branches came down in this like a weeping willow style, but it wasn't a willow. So it made this natural den within around the bole of the tree, if you like. And I'd cut. You never cut paths straight into swims at the mere. They were always dummy paths, usually little tiny tracks you could get down that ended up at the water's edge with brambles and stuff on both sides all overhanging. And then you'd get the chest waders out, put them on, get in the lake, walk along the margins, and then get out on another path that was an internal path, non-accessible from the back, because most of the mere had like, I don't know, 20 feet or more of nettle and bramble separating it from any sort of access. So once you'd got in the water, gone round the corner, come back out, you were completely hidden from everyone, inaccessible from everybody. And the canopy tree was like that. You came along the margins and then you had to go up this really steep bank, like sort of crawl up this bank, and then you was on the flat under this canopy tree. Fishing it was a bit of a nightmare because, as I said, it was a sharp slope down into the water. The canopy hid you. You couldn't cast as such. The water was really deep in the edge. You could just about stand in the first rod length, and you had to sort of do this weird sideways overhead thing over a bush and then slide round the front and lower the line down. And it was a tricky swim to fish, but once you were in there you felt very secure. It was lovely, and I used to hide all sorts of stuff in. It reminded me a lot, only the older people watching this will remember Enid Blyton. She was an author for kids books way back in the day. I mean, we're talking way back, and she did a book, I think it was called The Faraway Tree, and it was a kid's book about a tree that had all different creatures living in it, elves and goblins and whatever, and every week a different world would come to the top of the tree, and these unbelievably nice children who played in the tree would visit these worlds. Anyway, that's by the by, but this tree always reminded me of that. It was so convoluted as it went up, and I used to climb right up to the top, and there were all these places in there, and I turned it into my own version. I had a bed chair up there at one level that you couldn't see at all from the ground. I used to pull it up on a rope, put a load of branches in a cross of a tree, and then put the bed chair in a case, like in a zip bag, on top, so that from below you couldn't see it. I had some rods up there, I had various buckets, and I had this rope, and I used to get up the tree if I started a session in there and lower all the stuff down on a rope on a hook, flick the hook off, and then bring the rope up and get the next thing and lower them down. It was a proper boys' own adventure, the whole place, and I absolutely loved it. And it was a worthy opponent. I mean, that first common really sort of put me in a full sense of security. I thought, I've sussed it. They just can't. They're not going to be that hard to catch. They were that hard to catch. They were harder than hard to catch. But that just made me all the more determined, if you like. But the thing that sealed it for me in those early days was one particular warm afternoon. I was on I called it the southwesterly, so the far bank where you got the high bank and the reed bed and the little bay where the southwesterly blows. I called that the southwesterly swim. I was in this southwesterly bay, and there was a beautiful little tree, only a tiny little one, that hung over the water, and just off the front to the left, about 15 yards out, was a gravel hump, and right under the tree was a gravel slope that obviously the fish had made. You could see the little white stones that had been sucked in and blown out. Definite little feeding spot. And I was up this tree one day, I say early doors, I'm up this tree looking down, and I've seen a fish come through, one of the commons, probably mid-30, beautiful creature, like chestnut brown, a little hump on the back of his head, all his weight up front, one of those sort of, they call them up fronts, don't they? Up front common. So it had this big chest and sort of tapered away into this smaller tail section. And I'm watching him and he's milling about and he's just sort of drifted off over the side of the hump, and he's sort of, you know, I can really see him against the lightness of the sort of sand on the side of this hump. And then he's turned up and he's gone. And I had this feeling, you know, if someone's watching you, sometimes you know, I don't know what it, like a sixth sense. Sometimes you can just tell, can't you? You know, you look around and where there shouldn't be a person and there's someone there and you think, how did I know that? Well, I had that feeling that there was something there. And I sort of spun my head and looked and, oh my God, there was a carp there. I swear he was looking at me. He was a rod length away, just down there to my right, right in the edge. And as I looked, he peeled round and he came round in front of me. And there could be no mistaking the black mirror. He came under in this gin clear water. I could see the width across his shoulders. I could see every marking on his left flank as he turned around in front of me. And then his tail came round and it came right up and it's got that unmistakable, like sort of scoop out of the top lobe. His back, it's almost, you know, it's called the black mirror, but it's it's like a dark blue, you know, that sort of purpley black, and it blends down into this, I don't know what you call it, chestnut, I suppose, belly, and he's just like amazing. It comes up the top of his shoulders, dip, and he's got this shiny blue black head. It's immense. And it's come round right underneath me and it's sort of stopped in front of me. It's like it's showing off, you know, and it's just sort of pirouetted a little bit like that and then gone back a little, then it's flexed and, you know, the sort of little scales have lifted, and then he's just drifted off. And I can still see it, you know, I can still see it now in here. It just blew me away. You see something like that and you just think, I've got to catch you. But you also see something like that and you think, how am I ever going to land you? You know, when you go back to your gear and you look at your, I was fishing nylon then, and you look at your bit of nylon main line and it looks pathetic, you know, compared to what you've just seen. And the nature of the mere with the weed and the deep and the snags and that. And you're looking at a couple of 100 yards of this thin nylon line, whatever diameter it is, but you know, even if it's 0.35, you know, 15, 17, 18 pound, it's nothing compared to that thing. And you think, I've got to land that on this, really? But you know, that was the challenge. And I was proper up for the challenge. And then when I'd seen him, I was always going to be up for the challenge. This was only going to end one way. It doesn't matter how long it took. It was only going to get end one way. Had I known how long it was going to take, I don't know. Would I have thought about it differently? Probably not. There's a picture of him over there, which I keep looking at. Every time I look over there, I look and think, oh, you know, no, it wouldn't have ended any other way. I had to see it through. And eventually I did, but we'll get there, but it won't be for a while yet because there's a lot of story along the way, but that's all for another day. So I hope you've enjoyed the first instalment. I've no idea how long I've been rabbiting on. Obviously there's lots of other stuff, going to be lots of other stuff. It's going to grow. I hope you're going to be there to watch it grow with me. All sorts of things planned, but that's it for this first instalment. There'll be another one up shortly, I'm sure, along with, like I say, other bits and pieces. So thank you for joining me on my little journey and I hope you enjoy it. Until next time, see you later. Ta-ra.